Josephine, do you want to tell us what's coming next? What exciting
Yes,
program is
I'm
coming next?
super excited about what I had over at EJ's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us. You'll notice at the beginning we couldn't hear the presentation, and of course, it was a technical issue, but it was a very small glimpse of what it's like not to be able to engage through hearing, and it really ultimately ended up setting the stage for the next part. Um, this is a kind of day that you just get excited about. I hope everyone is feeling energetic and really finding ways to connect with each other. For everyone who's signed up through the website, thank you very much for that. And thank you for using the hashtag Africa Podcast Day. So, Africa Podcast Day has been coordinated, at least from the Africa Podfest side, by a remote team without taking a single flight. As co directors separated by a continent, we can appreciate the unique challenges of producing for Africa while working remotely. Even our team hasn't ever fully met, we've only seen each other on screens. So, when we invited podcasters to curate their own community events, we imagined that some would share our remote working and learning experience. We were pleasantly surprised by Africa News' submission of the launch of their Africa podcast, Cry Like a Boy. It's not often we get to see a podcast launch in real time. Today, Africa News has joined us to launch their podcast, and they will share their experiences and skills on how to produce a multilingual documentary podcast between Africa and Europe without taking a single flight. I can't imagine a more timely podcast launch, and we thank you, Team Africa News, for joining us and allowing us to be in this conversation with you and to be able to share it with the world. A very early good morning to you. I know we are at 7 a.m. here on this continent. So thank you so much for joining us. And it is a multilingual workshop. So everyone get out your pen and paper, your device, turn off your notifications if you can, and let's join the team from Cry Like a Boy podcast.
Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hey, good morning to everyone.
Hello.
Hi. So, thanks for having us. My name is Awa Barkala. I'm a French and Tunisian journalist. Welcome to this masterclass of Cry Like a Boy. We'll do this presentation with me, Marta Rodriguez Martinez, Lilo Montalto Monella, Mampeya Dio, and Naya Davlashian. So we are going to share with you a presentation of our podcast. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, welcome to our presentation. So today we're going to introduce you our podcast and how to produce a collaborative documentary podcast in several languages for you guys. So if you want to comment or ask any questions during this presentation, please use the hashtag #CryLikeABoy and dans la tête des hommes if you are a French-speaking audience. So Cry Like a Boy basically is a podcast who is going through toxic masculinity throughout Africa. And it's an original podcast series from Euronews that looks at the stories of 5 African continents who are challenging what it means to be a man. And through the ground, we have been working with journalists from Burundi, from Senegal, from Lesotho, from Guinea and Liberia. So we have been remote producing. We have been remote producing this show because of the pandemic of COVID-19. It all started with the COVID-19 because when we first produced this show,
Yeah,
when we first produced the show, it's okay. We first produced the show, it was under the lockdown. And so I'm gonna make a presentation of each of us. So Naira is a journalist from Russia, Mampeya Dio is a journalist from Senegal, and Marta Rodriguez Martinez is from Spanish, and Lilo Montalto Monella is from Italy. And as I said before, I'm French and Tunisian. So we're going to tell you a little bit more with Jerry Fisayo, who is introducing to you by this video a little more about Cry Like a Boy.
Let us explore the pressures linked to being a man in Africa. On our original podcast series, Cry Like a Boy, we take a look at the stories of men in Africa who are challenging what it means to be a man in their societies. This series takes a look at how men are changing themselves, their communities, and defying centuries-old stereotypes. We hear from all over Africa. Follow us and listen to Cry Like a Boy on africanews.com.
So as you can see, you can listen to Cry Like a Boy in every podcast platform that you know of, that you prefer, such as Apple Podcast and SoundCloud and Deezer and etc. etc. So here we are, Peya, Lilo, Marta, me, and Naira. We have started this podcast since last March during the lockdown. We all met during the lockdown, so the COVID-19 may have done some good things after all in terms of friendship. So we're going to give you 5 tips of how to produce a podcast remotely and in 2 languages, a bilingual podcast and multilingual production. Is that the next one? Am I right? Oh, okay, perfect. So how to produce a multilingual podcast across 2 continents without taking a flight. For these 5 tips, I will pass on by my leading role here, and I will take on the first tip. So what is the first tip? Collaborate with local journalists and choose them wisely. Why? Because as African and as a European, local journalists are very important because they are very aware of the different challenges, the cultural challenges, the on-the-ground challenges, sometimes also in terms of distance, in terms of conditions to make reports. And they can also give us tips for the budget you will prepare. They are also your eyes, your nose, your 5 senses, if I can say, in terms of transcription of their report. So we can here you can see Pascalina, who is from Lesotho. She's an investigative journalist. She was first working for the newspaper, and she made her first podcast production with us. You will hear her right after, if we can pass on the next, you will hear her right after Clarisse. Clarisse Chaka has been working on our first episode. Sorry if we can post this before. Sorry.
Iwachu, c'est le journal hebdomadaire et en ligne, presque le seul média privé qui reste au Burundi. Donc, je me suis spécialisée dans le domaine société et genre. Et alors, j'ai eu le plaisir de faire partie de l'équipe Cry Like a Boy pour le Burundi. C'était via une journaliste allemande qui m'a contactée et m'a branchée à l'équipe d'Euronews. Et j'ai accepté avec grand plaisir de faire partie du projet, surtout parce que le thème sur l'égalité des sexes sur lequel on a travaillé était mon domaine particulier. Je peux vraiment dire que ça a été une très belle expérience et aventure pour moi de produire le podcast. Parce que d'abord, c'était mon tout premier podcast. Donc, c'était vraiment la première fois que je produisais un podcast. Et les défis n'ont pas manqué. C'est surtout qu'il y avait un gros travail à faire et dans un délai très limité. Surtout parce que le sujet sur le Burundi portait sur des gens qui ne parlaient que la langue maternelle, donc le Kirundi. Donc, je devais tout traduire en français, alors tout, hein. Et il y avait aussi des contretemps avec mes sources. Je devais me déplacer loin de ma ville, à plus de 100 km pour produire le podcast. Et ouf, c'était hyper stressant, fatigant, et avec l'Internet du Burundi qui est aussi très lent. Mais je m'en suis bien sortie quand même. Et pour y arriver, j'ai dû sacrifier tout mon temps pour ce travail et j'ai quand même beaucoup apprécié de travailler avec l'équipe d'Euronews. C'était une très bonne collaboration. C'était vraiment un travail d'équipe, un vrai travail d'équipe. Et ce qui était le plus intéressant pour moi, pour la production du podcast, c'est le fait que je devais être vraiment attentif à chaque geste de mes interlocuteurs. Donc, prendre beaucoup de sons d'ambiance. Par exemple, quand j'allais prendre une interview dans un bureau, il fallait que je prenne le son d'ambiance de chaque mouvement, et quand il ouvre la porte, quand il s'assoit, quand il discute avec les gens. Donc, il fallait rien négliger de l'entourage et ça m'a beaucoup fascinée. J'avais l'impression de produire un film, quoi. Et mon conseil pour des gens qui veulent produire un podcast à travers plusieurs milieux, il faut d'abord se documenter sur la culture et les traditions de ce pays ou de ce milieu. Donc, connaître comment ils mènent la vie. Et si vous n'êtes pas capable d'arriver vous-même sur terrain, il faut bien choisir le journaliste fixeur qui maîtrise bien le domaine ou le sujet sur lequel vous voulez travailler. Voilà, merci beaucoup l'équipe Cry Like a Boy. Vous avez été une très, très belle équipe pour moi. Je vous remercie.
So that was that was Clarice Shaka, and she was our wonderful journalist in Burundi. Now you're going to listen to Pascalina. She's based in Lesotho, and you will listen to her episode shortly because we are publishing next week. And she was also great, and she has also great tips for you.
This is Pascalina here from Lesotho. I'm a journalist who collaborated with Euronews on the Cry Like a Boy podcast from the Lesotho side. At first, when they contacted me in April, telling me that they would wish to collaborate with me on the project, I thought I was going to write a print story because I basically specialize on print. So I was excited. I didn't think twice before I could accept that I would work with them in case they win the grant. Fast forward to August, after they had won the grant, I learned that I was going to work with them on the podcast. Yes, I got worried, really, really worried, because I had never ever worked on a podcast, not even a script. But I told myself that this is a challenge that I'm supposed to grab with both hands. One of the most challenging for me to get the recordings as they were demanded is that in most cases I'll find myself doing the interviews out in the open space. And the echo of the air, it wasn't very helpful. The second challenge was coming from a print media. For me, if I ask a question, for instance, how did you feel when your husband hit you? If the interviewee replies and said, it was painful, for me, I know how I'm going to write it. But for the podcast, she has to repeat and say, when my husband hit me, I felt this way. It took me a few interviews for me to be able to grab the skill. I'm now confident that I can write a podcast script. Okay, I must tell you that when Lilo said I must draft a podcast script, I thought, this is just an easy thing, I can do it. And then he sent me a script from Senegal, I think, in fact, Burundi. And then I attempted to do a script. My script was not communicating at all. But we had a virtual meeting, and then we started improving it, and then I learned a lot from it, really a lot. So much that I am producing my first podcast next month on the issues surrounding water in Lesotho. So working on this podcast has really empowered me as a journalist. I have a skill that I didn't have before I collaborated with Euronews. And it's not only the skill of producing the podcast, but it's also being open to a whole new of story ideas that talk to the people, that appeal to the real issues, the day-to-day issues that affect our communities.
So that was Pascalina.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna, as you see, Pascalina is now producing a podcast. So maybe, hopefully, we'll have her next year with her podcast. She's great. And our next journalist is Makeme. Makeme is now reporting in Guinea.
Je m'appelle Makeme Bamba, je suis journaliste. J'exerce ce métier depuis 10 ans. D'abord, je travaille à la radio nationale, la RTG, qui est Radio-Télévision Guinéenne. Quand tu vas sur le net, tu vois un podcast de telle maison, RFI, BBC ou Euronews. Mais moi, proprement, je n'ai jamais produit de podcast. Ça va être ma première fois. Et c'est en cela d'abord que je trouve le travail très intéressant avec la team, parce qu'on a eu à faire des séances de travail, télétravail. Et franchement, j'ai beaucoup appris. Bon, parfois, avec la limite du langage, puisque les rencontres se tiennent en anglais, mais on fournit un effort. Pour mieux comprendre et pour être imprégné de ce qui se passe dans ces séances de travail. Le thème sur la Guinée, ça va être sur l'immigration irrégulière. Et il y a beaucoup de défis quand on fait un travail sur l'immigration irrégulière, parce que les personnes qui ont échoué pendant l'immigration irrégulière n'ont pas envie de se faire connaître. Ils ne veulent pas que les gens parlent de leur échec, ainsi de suite. Donc, ça devient un grand défi de devoir faire adhérer les gens au travail que tu es en train de faire, de parler de leur vie, de parler de leur échec, parce que parfois, ils n'en ont pas envie. Et donc, mais heureusement, on a réussi. On a réussi à dire, par exemple, le cas de Mohamed Alpha, sur qui nous travaillons en Guinée. On a réussi à lui dire que c'est important de faire ressortir certaines faces cachées de l'immigration, certains sujets originaux, certaines choses dont les gens ne parlent pas souvent avec l'immigration irrégulière. Et donc, ça se passe très bien. Alors, moi, je suis très heureuse d'appartenir à la team et je serai très heureuse de produire beaucoup d'autres podcasts parce que la Guinée est très riche en culture, comme je le dis, et beaucoup de sujets peuvent être traités ici pour faire des podcasts. Merci.
So this was Makeme Bamba from Guinea. She's reporting for us, and you will have her episode very soon if you keep on following us in every podcast platform that you know, and you can follow us. So thanks for this, Makeme, Clarisse, and Pascalina. So I may pass by my turn to Marta.
Hello, thank you, Arwa. So as you see, we are all quite new with podcasting, but we are giving you some tips because think of producing a podcast during a pandemic, well, we had many obstacles, and something positive about the obstacles, you can learn a lot. But as you listened, many of us were completely new, and now we were thinking of new podcasts like Pascalina or Makeme. So podcasting, I think, is way alive in Africa and in our team. So our team, as you are listening to us, is very diverse, is full of accents. I think we don't have one nationality repeated. So I'm Spanish, Italian, Russian, French, Lesotho, Burundi. So we are completely full of our of nationalities. Our hosts in English, Daniel, she's Filipino Irish, and Hopotso, he comes from South Africa. So as you can imagine, I mean, we have also many obstacles coming from this mixed of different languages, but we also get to produce very rich episodes. For example, you're going to listen now to an example in our podcast, in one of the episodes, of the result of this linguistic richness.
In society, languages, there are words to demean those who do not fit into traditional male or female patterns.
Mastiazzo,
Nenaza,
marimacho,
Jifiak,
boy baba,
Sisi,
tomboy.
In Senegal, the word is gorge again.
Sorry, that wasn't an example of like the best vocabulary, but I guess it's it's very representative. So how can we make sense of all these languages and all these accents? So we are using different tools. Here we want to recommend them, some of the ones that we found are more useful, and some of them you have to pay for them. For example, Print. Print is a really good application to transcribe the scripts. But you have to pay for that. So if you have budget for it, we really recommend it, because it's something of the most time-consuming tasks, transcribing, and it's not the most creative one. So yeah, if you have some budget for it, go for Trint. Headliner is also really good for transcription and for creating like short videos for social media. For example, the video you've seen before, we've done it with Headliner. I think you can do up to 10 cuts without paying, and then you need to pay. But we really recommend it. And then we are writing the script, like, I don't know, sometimes it's like, I don't know, 5 people involved in one script, and some people are based in France, some people are based, for example, in Burundi. So what we use is Google Doc, a collaborative doc with Google. That's the best way to write, because you have also many sections, for example, the comment section, in which you are not erasing something somebody wrote, but you are like adding a comment. We are using DeepL for translations, and that's for free, and that's a really powerful translation tool that you can use. We are using Trello to organize all this mess, and we're improving, because, I mean, it's also, you need to test and see how it works for you. But we are improving the way we are organizing ourselves, because one of the main obstacles in this kind of production is project management. And if you are journalists, as we are, I think this is quite new for us also, project management. And then, of course, we have Zoom, because we have like daily conversations. And now we are going to listen to Junior, one of our protagonists, and he was speaking in French in the interview. And now you're going to listen to him speaking in English, so you can see how well we are doing with translations and dubbing.
My name is Junior. I'm 25 years old, and I'm still studying. I'm still doing my studies in communication, from which I'm trying to graduate in December in communication and marketing.
Okay, so our third tip, Lilo's going to explain to you.
So hello, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually, of course. So as my colleague said, possibly one of the best challenges that we have is to try to be uniform in our product, since we come from so many different cultures and from different countries at the same time, it would be hard to have the same kind of quality throughout the series if we didn't prepare a lot in advance. So each one of us could have different recording techniques, different devices. The sound could vary from recording to recording, from person to person, from setting to setting. So one of some of the principle that you wanna apply when you try to record a multilingual podcast in so many different languages, it's do a lot of preparation in advance. So what we did, we took a couple of months after we knew we were producing this podcast to set up some training and guidelines. And we organized training session with everyone involved. So you saw Pascalina, Makeme, Clarisse. So we gathered them in different calls. We listened to them, we talked to them, we wrote together these guidelines. Sometimes they're very technical. So how to hold a microphone, how to record properly, keep your microphone turned on before you start the interview, so you capture ambient sounds, you capture the hesitation when person speaks, keep your microphone flowing afterwards, try to record in a closed settings instead of in the open air because you have the wind sound and the cars, etc. So some of them are really technical. We also give some tips about the devices they should be using or the apps on their phones. And then a fundamental part of the job is the pre-script. So we wrote it together with our production company, Ocenta, and with our journalist. The main goal is to go in the field with something already clear in mind, so you know what you want to get from that recording session, what sounds you need. So a fixed list of sounds, and this is an example of a prescript. For example, that's the first episode that we launched. Each one of us in Lyon is like in charge of one episode as a main point of contact. But then each one of us also collaborates. So we review our scripts together. Naira was in charge of this episode with Clarisse, the journalist from Burundi. And this is the intro scene. So we kind of know what kind of sounds we wanted to get out of it. It's set in the Abatanga Mucho community, which is basically a community of men who stopped beating their wives and decided to change the way they approach their gender relationship. And that's an example of how we scripted a pre-script. Of course, once you go on the ground, you might get different sounds or different interviews from the ones that you planned, but at least you know who you want to speak to, what you want him to say, because you already know the story of this person. So hopefully you pre-interviewed this person, and also you know exactly what sounds you need for your podcast, for the ending result. In the previous one, what we wrote is actually describe. One of the challenges of not being on the field and being here in Lyon is that we don't see those scenes. We don't see those places and those countries. So actually, all of us in Europe never been to those countries. We planned to go there, but then the pandemic stopped and we couldn't take any flight. So we were talking with our journalist and we said, look, you've got to be our ears, our eyes here. So if you manage to describe this scene to us, then we can write about the script together. And sometimes it's better to describe things openly, and even the most obvious details. Sometimes they're obvious for us because we see them every day, but not for an external person who might find some detail really astonishing or incredible, and we just don't think about it because we're so used to see that thing. So we tell our journalists on the ground, no matter what you think it's might be silly or irrelevant, tell us what you see, because this is important to make the audience feel what you are feeling on the ground at the moment.
Even the smell, sound, the weather, there are many small things, but for a podcast it changes everything, because as you cannot see, but you need to feel what the person is feeling. So, and I think that was very interesting that we couldn't go there, we couldn't travel, but it makes us to ask for more descriptions, and I think that improved our script, because we were also, I mean, we were writing the scripts, but we were also the audience for that script. So that was the press script.
Exactly.
This is how it looks on paper. That is how it sounds.
She doesn't respect her husband. When a woman doesn't respect you, you slap her. That's it. Hit that insolent wench hard.
It's a hot and sunny day. We're in a big interior court of a Catholic church surrounded by many locals. The whole village is here. Women are carrying babies peeking out from behind their backs. Men and children are fighting for the best spot to see the spectacle. On the makeshift stage before them, amateur actors are dressed in clothes to represent the message that violence leads to unhappiness and poverty. The violent men in the sketch wear gray and sky blue rags, while the women wear t-shirts and colorful skirts in rich red and orange.
In this sketch, I'm realizing there are situations that I've lived at my own house. The violent man in rags, for example, reminds me of my husband.
Together, they play scenes from daily life in an ordinary family in this community. From violence to enlightenment to reconciliation and happiness.
So as you see, we have many descriptions. That was the beginning of the first episode of the series in the English version of the series.
And one of the last thing I want to say before giving the floor to my colleague Naira, one of the cool thing about this collaboration is that we encourage the journalists working with us, and we do the same with them, to simplify their ideas and to tell us what they see and what they hear in a simple way. Sometimes we tend to overcomplicate the reality around us, but then when we have to explain that to a friend or another person who doesn't have anything to do with it, we tend to use simple words and simple sentences, and those are the ones that we found out they work best for a podcast. So go really to the essence and simplify a lot, and then you really get to the core of it, and then it's possibly a good phrase for a podcast script. And once I've said all I have to say, and I will pass it on to my colleague Naira. Thank you, everyone.
Hi all, thanks again for having us. We're very excited to be here. And as we've said before, collaboration is the key in producing a podcast, because it's, basically you cannot meet, you cannot see each other. All you have is your phone, so you're always on the line. But once, all those interviews are done, they're translated, and we're working in many languages, and some of our episodes are, for example, our Burundi episode is mainly done in Kirundi, the local language, which means that we have a lot of characters we need to dub over. And that's when having friends who can, friends with nice voices who can help you really helps. And we're very lucky to be working in a, on a TV station, basically. So we have people who have nice voices to help us. But of course, when you're an independent podcaster, it can be more difficult. So the advice would be aware of the number of people you need to dub over in advance, because this takes time and effort, even if you're working on in an environment with many people who, have that talent. So basically, yeah, plan in advance, write down all the people you need to dub over, and find, friends, colleagues, maybe other podcasters. Don't hesitate to reach out, because I think creating a podcast is so complicated, even if you have resources, that, a documentary podcast anyway, that, the more collaboration you can have from people, the better it is. And I think it makes your podcast only richer. Marta can show now, one of our favorite colleagues who did a great voice.
This is one of our friends with a really good voice.
Hello, you're watching Euronews now, and these are our headlines this lunchtime.
So this is Euronews now anchor.
So Talks actually, and we used his voice, not just in English, but in French, which was also great. So if you're doing it like us in 2 languages, think about, the great thing about podcasts is that people welcome accents. Unlike, sometimes on TV, you can have like, this accent is not good for TV. In podcasts, it's not the case. So it's always, don't hesitate to show off your accent. Be proud of, your accent. It's a podcast. It's not, a rigid product. So yeah, we were very happy to have Talks with us.
So you listen to Talks in Euronews now, and now you're going to listen to Talks in our podcast.
In 1949, Dakar was already the gay city of West Africa. When I returned 9 years later, the French rulers had gone, and Dakar was gayer than ever.
I think that's my favorite part of all the podcast series. Talks is amazing. Anyway, I think we're done with the tip 4. So Peja, who works with us and does immense work on, helping us to with everything actually, and promote the podcast as well, will tell you all the troubles we get into after publishing.
And she's based in Nairobi, so she's not as asleep as we are, so that's good. Yeah. She's the most awake person in this team right now.
So, hi everyone. So, the real work begins now. So, once the podcast is launched, you don't have to relax. You have to make sure that you make it easy for your guests to get the podcast and share it. So first of all, you should submit your podcasts to podcatchers, which are applications that play podcasts such as Castbox, Spotify, Apple, or Deezer. You also might want to promote your podcast on social media. As you know, today, it's Impact Today. You can share rich media like audiograms, video, images, and anything you might find creative. So you can create images in Canva or other platforms. Audiograms like Marta has showed you, you can use Headliner. So don't forget to feature the links when you post stuff on social media platforms. Also, you must be very careful with SEO elements. And for that, for example, you can choose specific keywords to make the search of your podcast reachable. For social media, also a good idea is to share your podcast on YouTube. And it has turned to be an excellent platform for podcasts and for reaching many people. So we are currently working on that, and we should soon be sharing our podcast on YouTube. So don't forget to ask listeners to like, share, and subscribe to your podcast. So on social media, you can also do some cross promotion. So one aspect of that is to share your content across many platforms, or you can also collaborate with other podcasters and having them share your content on their platform and vice versa. So once you're set on social media, you might also want to do some contact tracing and outreaching to people. So you would mostly target people who have an interest in the subject which you're talking about, who have followers, and who can be a very good asset to promoting your podcast on different platforms. And also always remember to track your performances. So you can use, there are a lot of tools on the internet that you can use to analyze your data. And so just to finish, this is a non-exhaustive list of things you can do to promote your podcast. So basically you just have to try a lot of strategies, a lot of things, and just as I said, just always remember to track down your performances and really know what works well for your show, where is your audience, and how you might be able to answer their demands better. Thank you.
And we still haven't cracked the perfect recipe for sharing our podcast and promoting it. So that's the hardest challenge for us. So we're still in the learning curve. So we cannot really give a masterclass on how to promote it because we're new to it. But we are welcoming any tips, any advice you also can give to us because, as we said at the beginning, we are learning. It's all new to us, so anything really helps. So yeah, thanks for listening and for sharing your experience with us as well.
Also, if sorry, Marta, if there are any podcasters who are interested in our show, don't hesitate to contact us. We might be able to find a collaboration or something. Thank you.
And also to finish, maybe we always need help in translation, language, etc. So we sometimes look for people who can translate for us. So keep in touch with us. And Marta?
Yeah, we'd like to take some questions, but we don't know where we can see if there are questions. If you are following us, if you are following this masterclass and you have questions for us or comments, we'll be happy to answer. I don't know if through this session this is possible, but otherwise we are on Twitter. We're going to be on Twitter the whole day to celebrate the African Podcast Day. And if you use the hashtag Cry Like a Boy in English and then La Tête des Hommes in French, we are going to reply you in English and French. And yeah, not only questions, if you have suggestions for us, if you want to cross-promote, if you want a collaboration, if you have ideas on stories on how the pressure to be a man can hurt a society or a culture, or a story of someone who is challenging the gender stereotypes, we'll be happy to listen from you. I think something very interesting about podcasting is that it's quite new, which makes people very approachable and which makes people want to talk about different things and discussions. And I think we can learn from each other. We can learn from our mistakes and from the things we got right. Yeah. So here find us on Instagram and Twitter in English and in French. And yeah, we are happy to connect.
Yes. So for Twitter, it's at Euronews, and for the Francophone audience, it's at Euronews_French. And in Instagram, you can follow us at Euronews.tv and Euronews FR for the French. And Cry Like a Boy is also available on YouTube. If you want to follow us on YouTube, if it makes it easier. Just a reminder that it's a documentary podcast and a conversational podcast. So you have one part documentary, 2 parts documentary actually, and 2 parts where we go further with experts on topics.
Oh, we actually have a first question in.
Yeah.
from Tevin, and he's asking what licenses do we need to consider when using pre-recorded clips in documentary podcasts like news clips? That's a great question, actually, because copyright is very, very important, of course, in audio as well as in video or any other content. So basically, there is a law that allows you to use 15-second clips in. There is a law that allows you to use like 15-second clips in educational or news programs from films, TV, etc., etc. When it's something, when it's a news clip, when it's something that is not, show, you need to ask for permissions most of the time. When it's content on YouTube or anywhere else as well, you have to ask for permission. You have to reach out to people who own this content. When it's music as well, it's very important to reach out to the artist, and also keep in mind that some people don't understand copyright laws. So it's very, very important to make sure that the person understands what it means, that, the clip belongs to him or her. Because sometimes the clip actually belongs to, I don't know, a production house or something else, but the person, just because they shared it, they think it's theirs, and it's normal. I mean, not everyone is a copyright expert, but you need to be aware of this as a podcast maker. It's very, very important. Will save you a lot of time. It hasn't happened with us, but I know friends who have had problems with people reaching out to them and saying, "Oh, you used my stuff. It's not nice." Yeah, it's not cool.
And one of the things I've run into I'm producing the next episode on Lesotho. In Lesotho, it's a story of how the pressure to go and work in illegal mines in South Africa is harming the society over there. We had to use one song from an Italian-Belgian songwriter of the 50s. And I asked the legal team, and here in France, basically, if you stream less than 10% of the song, it falls under the fair use of the song. You credit it at the end, and then it's still a sort of fair use in a documentary podcast, so it's still usable as well. And something we forgot to mention is that we have one of our colleagues is helping us with sourcing music from local artists in the 5 different countries that we visit. So for each of our podcast episode, we buy 3 songs from the local artist, Burundi, Senegal, and Lesotho so far, so that the sound and the episode is enriched with the local music. And that's a nice collaboration that we have with local artists. And at the end of the project, our goal is to create a Spotify playlist where we can put all the songs that we used for the episodes as well.
And I think in this case, it's really important, the collaboration. So for example, you use their music, but at the same time, you promote the artist. So, and this kind of collaborations, if you ever do it, you need to write it in a paper, because it's very important that you always have that paper, because I don't know, in one moment that person can say like, of course you can use my music, but maybe, I don't know, some months later, some years later, there's an issue for them. They don't want to share their music any longer. But your podcast, you don't want to remove your podcast from Spotify, for example. So it's really important you agree which song, which minutes of the song. You put everything on paper, and you can also add an exchange of that. We are gonna say the name of your band. We are gonna include your link in the description, whatever they want, but put everything on paper, because you want your podcast to be on Spotify as long as Spotify lasts. So that's very important. Do we have other questions, Naira? that you can see?
Not yet, but if you have any other questions for us, we love answering questions.
Yes, as we said, we can answer in several languages. So yeah.
Oh yeah, if you have questions in French, we can also, if you're from the French part of Africa, we'll be happy to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Also, yeah, I think let's think about the tips we didn't give during the presentation. Maybe they could be useful as well. So, for example, what didn't we talk about? We talked about press scripts, which is very important.
One of the biggest one is possibly to do a lot of preparation in advance, because we found out that even producing a good 15 minutes documentary podcast, I mean, we don't know if it's good. You're going to judge it, but we hope it is good. It takes months and months and months. So I'm talking about my experience in Lesotho. We started having the first conversation with Pascalina back in August, beginning of September. And now the episode is coming out now. So in next week. So 6 months of back and forth and talks and recordings and oh no, we have to record this again. So yeah, take a long preparation before embarking into the podcast adventure.
Yeah, it's crazy because we are doing the conversational podcast and the documentary podcast. And I don't know, the conversational podcast takes us a couple of weeks to find the guests, to write a script, to research a little bit on the guest. And the documentary ones is like months of researching, putting together sounds, looking for archives, asking for permission to use the archive, looking for the music. Yeah, you cannot imagine the difference in the effort that we put in conversational ones and documentary ones. But it's also more rewarding, I must say, as a producer. I don't know, as a host, Arwan maybe can tell you a different experience because she's a host. Maybe it's more interesting to have the conversation, live conversation. But for us producers, yeah, we are prouder of our documentary episodes. And we wrote an article that we published yesterday in Medium where we have more tips. Because here we discuss the 5 main tips for us because we had an hour. But in our article in Medium that you can find it, we're going to post it later on social media and you can find it in Medium in our Cry Like a Boy profile. We have a long list of tips.
So I would like to encourage everyone who's listening to us to launch himself into podcasting. Like you can do this with little materials, and I know that in the African countries there is lots of local radios that are done with little material. You can launch yourself doing a podcast as long as you have an editorial idea, an editorial guideline, and that you can follow this guideline and engage the audience through episodes. And the regularity of each episode is also very important to keep faith with the audience. So for instance, Cry Like a Boy is every 15 days, release every 15 days, and launch yourself in it. Like you have to practice to get better. Be just true to yourself, and if there's any topics that interests you, it might interest someone else, so you need to launch yourself. The second things I also wanted to say that please bear in mind that if you don't have any access to Spotify, there is a lot of other platforms that you can publish in, especially SoundCloud, which is very accessible. And you have also free editing software such as Reaper that you can launch yourself with. It's not because you see or listen only big productions that you cannot do podcasts. I really encourage you to start your own podcast as long as you have idea. And if you can team up with friends and other colleagues, journalists, you can do it. Like it's very accessible.
I think one last tip, very important one, is listen to a lot of podcasts, because I think it's how we prepare also ourselves by listening many podcasts. So you can find, I mean, like, for example, I like how they build this scene, so I'm gonna try to do something similar, or I didn't like this podcast because this reason. So it is, I mean, if you are, for example, print journalists or video journalists, you know that you have to read a lot or you have to watch a lot of videos to prepare yourself. With podcasting, it's the same. You have to listen to a lot of podcasts and you have to find the things they do right that you can also use in your podcast, and the things that you didn't like. So you can also define a little bit your style or what you want to do.
And don't forget to put 5 stars.
Yeah, please, if you listen to our podcast, we don't want to tell you need to put 5 stars because maybe you don't like it, but at least put a comment because any kind of feedback is welcome. Also, if it is a bad feedback, we are still producing some episodes. We are producing episodes in Guinea and Liberia now, and we'll be happy to learn from our mistakes and from the good things. So if you listen to us, please let us know. That's the important thing. We like to feel there is a community behind this, and we like to feel like people are listening to us. And
thanks everyone for following us. We have to keep on pass by the next conference, the next masterclass. Thank you for having us all.